No child left behind in the court jester schools. Get these kids out on the street farting again. Holy cow, what have we lost as a society?
Welcome, everyone, to Unbelievable, the podcast where I tell my good friend two unbelievable stories, one real, one fake.
And I have to guess which one is which.
That's right. I am My Farts Don't Smell, Luis Mejia, joined here by Burper, I hardly know her, Kurt Danner.
Who is she?
And once again, as always, we are back to share with you two of the most fun stories from across Universal history. But one of them is always going to be fake, and Kurt has to figure out which one that is. Will I be good enough to fool him this time? I sure hope so. But since it will be me that has the burden of telling the lie, taking over the reins of today's episode, I'm going to pop it to you, Kurt, for the beginning to share a fun fact for me before we get started. So, Kurt, do you have a fun fast fact for me?
I sure do, although I'll say it's not a regular fast fact. This is more like a quiz. I've got a special little thing for you here, Luis, okay? So, first of all, let me just tell you this information, okay? This is the title of 4 different fiction novels, all right? So, Zabiba and the King, that's one title.
Okay.
The Fortified Castle, Men of the City, and Begone, Demons!
Ooh.
Now, Luis, here's multiple choice for who is the author of those 4 fiction novels. Were those written by A, former dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, B, former dictator of Spain, Francisco Franco, C, former terrorist leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, or D, former dictator of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi?
This is a wonderful fast fact, Kurt. I am very pleased by this. And you know what? I'm going to go with my gut, and I'm going to say that Osama bin Laden authored these books.
You're going with bin Laden? Okay, just out of curiosity, which one, in the perfect world, which one would you want it to be most? Like, which would be the funniest?
Muammar Gaddafi. I think if Muammar Gaddafi,
or is it just hard to pick?
Begone which? What was it called? Begone what? Demon?
Begone, demons!
That's incredible. I was just gonna say, Kurt, just please, for the love of God, out of context, don't say which one you prefer out of these choices going forward.
Fair point. Well, I'll tell you, Luis, unfortunately, you're wrong on both accounts. Those 4 books, in fact, were written by former dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. And I know this is your episode, but if you'll indulge me, Luis, can we go on a little tangent into the literary works of Saddam Hussein? Is that all right?
Please, Kurt, I insist.
You're like, date and time. I will, anytime you want, we can get into this. Well, first of all, let me say this.
You don't even have to ask.
Well, first of all, let me say that this fact was brought to my attention by longtime friend and fan of the pod, Will. So shout out to my boy, William. Okay, so now Saddam Hussein was dictator/president of Iraq from 1979 to 2003. For some reason, between 2000 and 2003, Saddam Hussein decided to write 4 fiction novels. The first 2 actually say that they're authored by, quote-unquote, written by he who wrote it, but it was a very open secret that Saddam Hussein was, in fact, the author. Now, it's unclear why he decided to write these. A couple common theories are, one, maybe he literally just got a little bored with being in charge of Iraq and was like, let me do some side projects.
Nice.
But it's also possible that
yeah.
there was some propaganda effort in here. But I like to think that he was just bored.
I mean, most things happen the best when you're bored, if I'm honest. And, Saddam Hussein, I respect that. There's a lot of other things you could have done when bored. And I feel like that's
true.
That's the least problematic one you could have done.
You wake up and you're Saddam Hussein and have a clear schedule in the day. Probably one of the more innocuous things you could do is write a fiction novel. So, first book, called Zabiba and the King. This was published in 2000. It takes place in medieval Iraq in the village of Tikrit, which is actually the same village that Saddam was from. It tells the story of a peasant woman named Zabiba, her husband, and the king. So in this story, Zabiba is supposed to represent Iraq. Her husband is supposed to represent the United States, and the king is supposed to represent Saddam Hussein himself, of course.
Yeah, humble man. Humble guy.
Now, after the king and Zabiba meet several times and have a bunch of long discussions about political theory and how the king can be the perfect, most best king ever, they end up falling in love. And Zabiba's husband, who is a pretty unsavory fellow, his main interests seem to be money, orgies, and violence.
Or oil.
Oil probably should have been here, but unfortunately this is taking place in like the 7th century. So, but he finds out.
Saddam Hussein was like, no, that would be too on the nose, wouldn't it? Huh?
Oh man, I frankly don't think anything is too on the nose for him, but you gotta wait till the end to find out about that business. So, Zabiba's husband is not very happy about this emotional affair between his wife and the king, so he decides to disguise himself and assault Zabiba, thinking that this will make the king abandon her. Instead, the king and Zabiba lead the royal army to kill her husband. Then afterwards, Zabiba gives a speech about Arab nationalism and dies. Then the king also dies. And then finally, the army talks about wanting to liberate themselves from foreign powers and be free of kings forever. Which is... it's not the book I would have expected from Saddam Hussein in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I don't know what to do with that, Luis. What do you have any thoughts about this, or do you want to go on to the second one?
No, Kurt, listen. If you're already a dictator, if you're already an authoritarian leader, are you going to write yourself as an authoritarian leader? Of course not, Kurt. Come on. That's just dictatorship 101. You don't say the quiet part out loud. Last time a dictator said they were going to be dictator for life, they got stabbed like 63 times on the 15th of March.
That's true.
So
that's generally not the greatest idea.
Come on.
But I will say, I think it's kind of weird that like he kills off the character that's supposed to represent him at the end, and then the remaining people are like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have a king at all. I feel like isn't he like inviting himself to be assassinated a little there?
Nah, Kurt, he's playing the long game. He's thinking ahead. He's thinking maybe it's a double negative. Right? Or no, not a double negative.
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, you're telling them, I won't be a dictator. You can kill me. And of course, no one's going to want to. So, not to hand it to Saddam Hussein, because you absolutely don't have to hand it to Saddam Hussein. But
one thing we've learned over the years on this podcast, you in fact do not have to hand it to Saddam Hussein.
That's right.
So, that being said, book number 2, which, by the way, keep in mind, he wrote all 4 of these books in a course of 3 years. So, Saddam Hussein, very prolific writer.
Yeah.
The second book, The Fortified Castle, this time it's set in modern day, and it follows an Iraqi war hero who was shot in the leg and captured by Iranian forces. After he escapes with some friends, he returns to Baghdad, and during this journey, he meets a Kurdish girl, and they fall in love and decide to marry. Now, in this case, the story represents Saddam's attempt to win over the hearts and minds of northern Iraq, which was a heavily Kurdish area. So not quite as exciting as the Zabiba plot, but we move on to book number 3, titled Men of the City.
Wait, Kurt, would you consider yourself to be a Kurdish guy?
Moving
on, book number 3, Kurt. Let's hear it.
Pain, sir, pain. Book number 3, titled Men of the City. Basically, this one is just like an autobiography of Saddam Hussein and his political party's rise to power, but with all the names changed. So there's not really much to talk about there. And then the 4th book, which I would say arguably might be the most fun, titled Begone, Demons! Or some alternate translations, Get Out, You Damned, or Get Out of Here, Curse You.
Ooh, I like that last one. That was how it was translated on international markets. Demon was too strong.
Well, whatever the title, this book was allegedly finished the day before U.S. forces invaded Iraq in 2003. Now, this story in the book is narrated by Abraham. That's the biblical figure Abraham. And it tells the story of 3 friends or acquaintances. I can't really determine what their relation is to each other, but these 3 people are Joseph, who is meant to represent Christians, Isaac, who is meant to represent the Jews, and Muhammad, who is meant to represent the Muslims. Now, Isaac, who is representing the Jews here again, leaves his home to go west, where he meets a Roman emperor. Isaac and the emperor get rich by taking advantage of the local population, and then Joseph decides to join them, and the 3 of them make so much money that they decide to make 2 towers to store it in. Arab fighters then burn the towers and martyr themselves in the process, which, if you can't tell, is supposed to be an allegory for 9/11. And then after this, Isaac and Joseph decide to invade their former homeland, but Muhammad repels the attack. So he really got pretty wild in the last book there. I mean, I guess that's what happens when you're actively fleeing while writing your fiction novel, maybe? I don't know.
Do you think he had editors that came up to him and said, hey, Mr. Hussein, do you think we should include 2 burning towers in this book? I feel like that's Again, a little too on the nose.
I think not only did he not have editors who wouldn't tell him that, he didn't have a single person in the country who wouldn't tell him that. Nobody corrects Saddam Hussein.
That was Saddam Hussein's biggest problem, just a lack of editorial censorship.
That's true. When you're a dictator, nobody's going to proofread your paper, you know? They'll be like, well, I guess that's how it's spelled.
That's so right. Maybe I should become a dictator. I really don't like when I receive feedback, you know? I'm not a big fan of what you call it, constructive criticism.
And you're a terrible fiction writer.
That's so true.
I'll miss the made-up story now that I said that. I'll fall for a work of fiction you're going to tell me 30 minutes from now.
Yeah. I want the world to know that Kurt just called me a poor fiction writer. I just hold that in your mind as we move ahead. Well, thank you, Kurt. Thank you for those fun facts. They were very fun. They were very lovely. Thank you. You know, it's a good episode when we begin by talking about authoritarian dictators. You know, that's nice.
And their literary works.
Then acclaimed author Saddam Hussein, known for nothing else.
Yeah, you know, you never hear him say author Saddam Hussein, okay? He never gets much recognition for that, you know. You be dictator one time, well, technically 2 times, but with only a couple years gap in between, and you're never recognized for your authorship again.
What people don't realize is that he was also a multi-hyphenate, okay? His Wikipedia page, Wikipedia editors, get on there.
Excuse me, polymath Saddam Hussein? All right, get us out of here. Go quick, the stories. Go.
Okay, Kurt, on that note, we are going to leave and go to our stories for the day. And I'm very excited to tell you these, Kurt, because they relate to subjects that are very near and dear to my heart. I'm not going to reveal what those are just yet, but I think you're going to see what they are. And funny enough, surprisingly enough, even if they're close to my heart, I'm not at any moment going to talk about the Habsburg family, nor the Maximilian Second Empire of Mexico, nor Mexico itself, Kurt. So I think we're turning big leaps today.
The Vatican is still on the table. That's what I'm hearing.
No comment, Kurt, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Okay. Listen, Kurt, I cannot escape. You know, I do what I can. But
it's not my fault. I know you really well, Luis. Okay.
Yeah, I get it. It's your fault, frankly.
Oh, true.
Okay, Kurt. So we're going to begin our story, and I'm going to ask you one question. Are you aware of farts?
Familiar with their work.
Yes, farts, flatulence. Collectively, as a culture, as a human species, we love a little bit of passing gas, if you will. We love to talk about that funny little action our bodies do. Now, Kurt, I would say that farts, flatulence, in a way, is the most human thing.
It is pretty human.
Throughout history, people have farted, and I think that's a beautiful thing. You know, I think that connects you to the rest of humanity. It brings us in, no matter whether you're born in 1998 or whether you're born in 2098 BC. Everyone in their life has farted, for better or for worse. That's so true.
And it's very humanizing too. You know, you can think about like Julius Caesar's about to cross the Rubicon, and he's like, "Man, I really gotta pass one," but there's like 20 guys around me.
That's
right
right.
Now. Like,
that's
you know that you never know which historical figures of history might have been holding a fart at the moment that they made their mark.
Kublai Khan is receiving Marco Polo and just holding in the loudest, wettest, just bad boy, right? Anyway.
Heinous.
It's rough. So, but it's a beautiful thing when you really think about it. And I'm afraid that I'm going to get a little scatological. We're starting off with that note this episode, but it's okay because I just want you to think of it as the one thing that unifies us all as humans. We all die and we all fart. Okay. Now, with that context, with that in mind, Kurt, let me take you back to 12th century England.
Good decade.
We are going back.
Good century, I mean.
We are going good century. We are going back to very soon after the British Isles were taken over by William the Conqueror, a Frenchman. So we're still back in early Britain, early England, where essentially the English were still French. Okay, you know, this was back in that time. So it's the mid 1100s, Kurt, and we're feeling just fine. Henry II is King of England. and we're feeling good. Okay. So we are in Henry II's England, early England, very fun stuff. This is back in the day when none of them had last names. Rather, they just had titles,
Okay.
which is, I think, a really fun part of English history. But 1100s, there's not a lot going on.
Right.
Like, respectfully to all the people that all our listeners from 1100s England, 1152 was not the place for parties, right? Typically, the majority of the population was out in the fields, right? You were a day laborer, you were a worker, you were a peon in someone else's field, yes? So for a lot of people, of course, you've got your day set by doing grueling manual labor most of the time for someone else. However, if you're rich, if you're part of the aristocracy, if you're part of the monarchy, you are afforded a lot of different luxuries, gems, gold, etc. But one of the main luxuries that you're afforded with power and money at this time is boredom, right?
Right.
So you've got your whole day to yourself. You have to entertain yourself somehow. So let's talk about the kings. The monarchy, when not at war, who's the most bored boy?
The king.
Obviously, it's the king.
Right.
Right. So if you're not fighting anyone, you're going to be a very bored person. And let's remember, kings became kings at like 21, 22 back in the day. Right. So you're a very bored lad.
Up to no good.
Imagine it's 1152. You're Henry II and you're bored out of your mind. So due to this, we had certain different professions that formed to keep the king and the royal court entertained. So musicians would be brought in to the court, as well as different entertainers like jugglers and poets, etc. But one of these professions, one of these jobs that was very close to the king and meant to entertain the king was, of course, the fool or the jester.
Le fool.
So we're bringing in the fool, okay, Kurt? And this is very exciting.
It is. Anything involving the fool is exciting. It always makes a good historical story when the fool is in it. Somebody's getting killed or made fun of or something.
That's right. The fool is here and he is not playing. Okay? So, well, actually, he is playing quite a lot. He is up for the tomfoolery. However, it is good tomfoolery. As you may know or may not know, Kurt, the jester actually had quite a lot of power in the royal court. One of them was that he actually had the ability to make fun of the king, something that everyone else didn't have.
I feel like I'm not really sure, what I do or don't know about court jesters, because I don't really trust like the media portrayals of court jesters, and that's probably like where 90% of my knowledge is coming from. But it does seem like there is something to what you're talking about with this boredom that, okay, you're the most powerful person in the land and you're bored. And if there's only like a handful of people that can fix that, they're going to get a lot of power, especially if one of them is uniquely good at entertaining you, right? I mean, you think of the court jester as a very lowly person, but they kind of have like a monopoly on the market. If they're one of the few people who the king finds entertaining. So they really can get away with a lot of times.
And interestingly, too, I mean, it's like you have your favorite comedian always around you. This jester has to know your comedy. This jester has to know the type of things you like and don't like, and has to be able to, make fun of that. So that's a very special skill as a comedian back in the Middle Ages. Now, these jesters were licensed professionals, funny enough, and they
licensed from jester school.
You had to have a license to be a jester. How do you earn it? I don't know. But you did have to work on it. To be an entertainer, to be a comedian, it was a profession, right? You were a professional fool in a way. Now, they were a member of the courts, and of course, they were charged with telling jokes, maybe saying things like puns. They were well read enough to do so, which was, quite frankly, a really good skill to have back in the Middle Ages. They knew different party tricks. They knew different even slapstick routines, right? So they were just there to amuse. And
ye old who's on first bit.
It's just a single guy reciting who's on first.
Which is really confusing because they haven't invented baseball yet, but the king loves it, so.
Everyone was so lost, but Henry II was a big fan. But so speaking of Henry II, the king hires a specific jester named Roland. Okay. And now, in these times, in this time period, right, Middle Ages, you don't really know, or really last names are not a huge thing, like surnames, right? So you have a first name, a given name,
Right.
and then either your profession or your location. Okay. So this man, Roland, he was nicknamed, or he was known as Roland Lepetour. Kurt, do you know what Lepetour means?
I don't.
If we translate Roland Lepetour from French to English, it translates directly to Roland the Farter.
Nice. Oh, like he's got his signature move.
And that's
perfect.
Exactly right, Kurt. He was a flatulist. That is, of course, a portmanteau of flatulence and artist. You can also call him a fartist, if you will.
Wow.
He was
amazing.
a professional flatulist, okay? Now, before I move on, I want you to know, Kurt, you may hear the word flatulist and you may be a little bit confused, flabbergasted, surprised even, okay? But flatulist was, and to some extent continues to be, a very well-known profession throughout history.
What?
Okay? Yes. So flatulists have been around since ancient times, believe me or not.
What is going on at this court jester school? It's like I'm majoring in court jester with a minor in flatulence. I can't go out tonight. I got a juggling exam at 1. What is going on?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, Kurt, if we're talking about flatulence right now, flatulists probably are in competition with prostitutes for having the oldest profession in history. Okay? We've been hearing of flatulists since ancient China. And for example, there are even some quotes from people back in the day doing reference to flatulists. One of them, funny enough, comes from the one and only Saint Augustine of Hippo. Okay? So Saint Augustine actually has a quote that says, "Some performers had such command of their bowels that they can break wind continuously at will, so as to produce the effect of singing." Okay?
What? What is this lost art form? You know what? I just did a 180 right there. Reopen the jester schools. We need funding now. No child left behind in the court jester schools. Get these kids out on the street farting again. Holy cow. What have we lost as a society?
Open the schools and also the rectums. We need them. So as we can see, there were flatulists that knew how to fart on command. They knew how to keep a beat, and they also knew how to keep a melody, apparently, which is honestly, Kurt, incredible. And frankly, a lost art.
Do you think you need musical talent in addition to the farting talent? Like, were there some people who had very good control of their anus, but they just have terrible pitch?
Or maybe they only have perfect pitch in their anus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they can't for the life of them sing a melody, but fart it.
Speaking of the things you don't know about famous people, like any one of us sitting here or listening to this podcast could be capable of perfect farting pitch, and we don't know it. What may have been had we been born in 12th century England? Oh, man.
That's true. So there's a lot to think about. And across history, we find fartists or flatulists. For example, in the Edo period of Japan, we even had some flatulists that were known as the Hepiri Otoko, which literally translates to the farting men. And they had alleged...
Like the ancient Blue Man Group.
Yes, Kurt.
But arguably better, frankly. No disrespect to the Blue Man Group, but I mean, it's tough to compete.
Arguably, Kurt, no, it is better, I think, objectively. And farting competitions and also used to happen. So all I'm trying to tell you, Kurt, I'm trying to put you into this context that farting was huge. Okay?
No, you made me a believer. I'll tell you what, Luis, if this is all made up, my brain is irreparably damaged. I'll never be able to unlearn this.
That's right. So, okay. Now that you have all of this context, it's important to talk about that farting was really popular in the Middle Ages. So while this profession, this talent has in a way been lost to time, it made people go crazy. just go absolutely nuts in medieval times. To the point where even Shakespeare, has written fart jokes into his plays. Or
meaning like it's a joke about people farting, or it's like, and then this person delivers this line through their butt.
I fart in iambic
And
pentameter.
it's still an iambic pentameter.
Oh, that's incredible. But yeah, I mean, Shakespeare includes fart jokes within his works, and just I find that fascinating. So okay, let's move back to Roland. Okay, so Roland, of the flatulists of his time, he was considered the best. Kurt, no one else held a toot against him.
Good for Roland.
Frankly, he was so good, in fact, that as a reward for his service to the crown of Henry II, the king was granted a manor and an estate of around 100 acres.
Wait, Roland was or the king was?
Roland was. The king granted Roland, for his service as a flatulist, an estate that included a manor and around 100 acres.
And on those 100 acres, all the baked beans you can eat.
Nothing but beans, as far as the eye could see. So here's the thing, Kurt. 30 acres? If you had 30 acres in this time period, you were a wealthy person. Okay? You were rich.
Yeah, that's not a small amount.
No. And this person had about 3 to 4 times the amount of land.
Especially since there's a division between just owning any amount of land and not owning land.
Exactly. So even owning any land is huge at this time. Now imagine you have a whole 100 acres, okay, of it. Now, this land, Kurt, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but this land was really not for free. It was a bit of a rent situation.
What, does he have to put in 2 farts a week?
Here's the thing, Kurt. We do know exactly what kind of rent that this man had to pay. So, do you want to take a quick guess as to what Roland the Farter, the court jester, had to pay the king in order to keep his 100-acre estate?
I mean, I don't know how much I was joking about the 2 farts a week thing, but I'm going to guess it's like he's now, the fool of the king for free for life in exchange for the estate or something like that.
So, according to the Liber Fidorum, which in Latin translates to the Book of Fees, which is a document from the time that says, essentially, it's a tax checking book, right? It's an accounts book that kept track of what everyone owed to the crown. This man said that he had to pay. Are you ready? Unum saltum et siffletum et unum bumbulum. Okay?
Okay.
If we translate this from Latin, Kurt, it means 1 jump, 1 whistle, and 1 fart. And by the way this is translated, or by the manner that this is translated, we can assume that this is all to be performed consecutively.
Right.
Or concurrently.
Or all in one
another.
motion, frankly.
Right. And so he was obliged to perform this every single year on the birthday of our Lord before his master the king. So his tax was to perform 1 jump, 1 whistle, and 1 fart at the same time on Christmas for the king. And in return, he would be able to keep a 100-acre estate, Kurt.
Wow. The power of this man, Roland. I guess he must have really been a professional, because imagine if you get up to the date one year and you can't pull it off on the spot,
Could you imagine?
That would be devastating.
You have a lot on the line. Frankly, you've got your entire
livelihood. Now you're the fool, and not in a good way.
That's right, Kurt. So could you imagine just how impressive, how mind-blowing, astounding it must have been, the feat of this man? 1 jump, 1 whistle, and a fart.
Yeah, that's amazing. But I'm also wondering what the other nobility or landowning people's opinion was of this guy. Was this just oh yeah, he's got all this land from regular trade like anyone else have it? They're like, there's the farting guy's estate. Yeah, don't go to dinner at his house.
Stinky boy. Stinky boy down the street.
They won't let him in their country club because he's only rich because of his butt.
I mean, a lot of people are only rich because of their butts, Kurt. So I feel like we can't really judge him. A lot of people don't even have to do anything with their butts these days, Kurt. You know, I think we lost what true talent looked like.
That's true. We'll return to tradition where many of the wealthy landowning people in the country are only that way because they can jump, fart, and whistle simultaneously. I mean, again, what did we lose as a society? Reopen the schools.
You used to be able to fart, whistle, and jump in front of the king, but now you can't because of the woke liberal mob, Kurt.
Remember what they took from you.
Return. Now, Kurt, unfortunately, beyond this, we don't know much about Roland the Farter's life. We actually don't know when he was born. We don't know when he died. But the fact that he is in an official tax collection, in an official government book, it really solidifies the fact that he was real and that he was granted this estate.
Right.
Okay? So luckily with these sorts of documents, with these sorts of official tax documents, we do know what happened to him after he unfortunately passed, not gas, but away. So after Roland's death, the book, the Liber Fedorum, actually changed, and no longer was his family required to do a whistle, a jump, and a fart at the same time.
Right. No, I assume, because it's like, what is that going to pass to his son?
That's right. So at his passing, later, they were instead required to be paid in cash, that rent for the 100 acres.
Actually, kind of a brilliant scheme, potentially, by the king. I don't know if I give him credit for thinking that far ahead, but it is like smart that they just give it to this guy for nothing. Yeah. He works some amount for free, and then as soon as he dies, they're like, by the way, rent will be $1 million a month. You don't want to pay? Then jump, fart, and whistle simultaneously. That's what I thought.
And you know what? So this land continued, and there are some stories that say that once the next kings came through, they really grew disillusioned with the Farter family and, you know, took away their estate from them. But, you know, we're nearly 1,000 years after this man's life, and he still lives in our heads rent-free. Or actually, he doesn't live rent-free. He just lives a hop, a whistle, and a fart away.
I was gonna say it does cost him that one maneuver still to get on this pod, evidently. So not completely free.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what an amazing story, and it's too bad we don't know where he ended up or what he died of. Man, a guy like that, you can't like die in your sleep or something. It had to be the weirdest thing ever. Like he saw a bear and it startled him so bad that he farted until he had a heart attack or something like that. I don't know what it was, but. What a hooligan. I mean,
dysentery.
Dysentery, frankly. Odds are dysentery.
It must have an effect on your health, do you think?
I'm actually like really curious about if this is like au natural. Like, do they really have this bowel control? Or is he like, someone's got to blow air up my butt before I go see the king today, and then I'm just going to hold it until I jump? I don't know, because... Now, you know, I was thinking, like, man, a lot is on the line if you can't perform on that one day. But also, this guy is the best in the land, allegedly. So maybe this is just, like, an easy parlor trick for him.
Maybe he just has an assistant that every event he goes to, he just has, you know, like a straw and willingness to help a brother out.
Maybe there's just a plant.
You know, inject some
Maybe
air.
there's just a plant in the courtroom that has a whoopee cushion. And they just, like, hit it whenever he jumps and whistles.
Kurt, please do not take away some of the legitimacy of my boy Roland. What did he do to deserve this?
Don't besmirch the good name of Roland the Fartist.
Roland the Farter lives in our hearts forever, and he'll continue to do so. Okay, Curtis. Well, we've gone from Roland the Farter and his estate. What a lovely jaunt we had through his life. But it's time to move on to our next story. And you know what, Kurt? I'm not going to make it too difficult for you, okay? We're actually going to stay in the same time period. We're not moving too far away. And not only are we staying in the same time period, we are staying in the same country, even.
Oh?
So, Curtis, we're staying in the Middle Ages, specifically medieval England.
Okay.
Now, remember, the monarch that was at the center of the previous story was Henry II, Electric Boogaloo. Right. Henry II had a daughter among many of his other children. I mean, he also had a child named Richard, who would then become Richard the Lionheart, famous in English history. But he had a daughter named Matilda. Now, Matilda had a son, and this son was named Otto. Okay, so Otto, while being not a direct descendant of the king, Richard the Lionheart, or his brother King John, he was just a cousin. He was just part of the family.
He's in the mix.
Right, so Otto, yeah, he's one of these famous just earls and counts that are just around the royal family. Okay, it's these guys that are in the periphery that maybe don't necessarily make a lot of history, but they're there.
They just get to be rich for funsies.
That's right. However, Otto is indeed remembered. Interestingly, he does have a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, the one thing that he is remembered for is drama.
Unfortunately? What do you mean? Come on.
You're right, Kurt. Sorry, maybe I was a little bit hyperbolic there, Kurt. Now, Otto, he was raised under the care of his maternal grandfather, which of course we know was Henry II.
Right.
Now, he was, Richard the Lionheart was off in a crusade somewhere trying to take Jerusalem, as everyone was trying to do at this point. He was off in a crusade. This man, Otto, was passed around from earldom to countdom to another earldom. He was married off to different people. Since everyone realized that this guy had no direct access to the throne, they're like, okay, at least let us marry you strategically to someone.
Right. Get something out of the deal.
Yeah, come on. Like, let's make you useful for once in your life. He was indeed married off to different women, to different princesses from across the land. He was married to an Eleanor from France. However, Eleanor died in mysterious ways.
Oh.
And then he was married to a Catherine of Austria, and Catherine also died in mysterious ways.
Okay.
He just kept bouncing around, not just from earldom to earldom, but from wife to wife.
Right.
He married a Mary that also died. It really wasn't working well for Otto. No one really knows why. So
Someone might know why. Someone potentially knows why.
Someone may know who did this or what happened, but it won't be us, I'm afraid. I'm afraid the historical record does not extend to our cognitive abilities. So not only was he being married off to different people from different places in Europe, I mean, of course, this also led to him going all around Europe and bumping uglies with different people, bumping shoulders with other diplomats and other aristocracy around Europe at this time. Right. So he was a well-learned guy, and he got to make a lot of different connections. At one point, he ended up in Rome, okay? In beautiful, eternal city, Rome. And coincidentally, he was there when the Holy Roman Emperor, in this point being Henry VI, had died. Where, Kurt? Do you want to take a quick guess?
In his bed.
The Crusades, Kurt. Oh. Everyone was at the Crusades at this point.
Maybe he died in his bed on a crusade,
We'll never know. But Holy Roman Empire, Henry VI dies off in the Crusades. And at this point, the Holy Roman Empire, people are not really happy with it. It's not Charles V again, as we used to have it. We used to have it so good.
Why are people not really happy with it?
They're not happy with the dynasty. They're not happy with the family that's currently on the throne.
Because they're like bad rulers, is the thought here?
Essentially.
Okay.
So since the Holy Roman Empire, you know what they say, it wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it wasn't an empire. Regardless of that phrase, the bishops, archbishops, the clergy still had a huge say into who was becoming emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, right? So the bishops of Rome really did not like Henry VI and his family, who he came from the Hohenstaufen dynasty, okay? As you can tell, very German name.
Yeah.
The Holy Roman Empire is just Germany. But so they really didn't like the Hohenstaufen dynasty. And, this was due to several different reasons. Partly crusades. We've talked in a previous episode before that crusades cost a lot of money. And sometimes to get that money, you're going to squeeze it as much as you can from your people. And your people are not going to get really happy. And then once your people don't have money to give you, you're going to move to aristocracy and clergy. And the clergy, of course, is not happy to let go of their gems.
Right.
So the clergy really wanted to get rid of the Hohenstaufen dynasty. So Henry VI is dead. They have an opportunity. A funny quirk of the Holy Roman Empire at this point is that the bishops actually have enough authority to call for a vote, right? To elect the next Holy Roman Empire.
Wow.
Emperor, I mean.
So the emperor could be elected? I mean, like, what was this built into the system in a way, or was it just kind of like the clergy has a lot of power, and I'm sure the dynasty would not be super happy about that, but maybe there's not a lot they can do about it.
See, here's the thing. This is still early enough in the Holy Roman Empire, right? Where there is still, some sort of, there's still a lot of sway in the hands of the clergy, right?
Right.
So this is the point where the king does not put the crown on their head.
Right.
It's always the clergy that puts their own crowns on their own head.
So the clergy kind of facilitates like the transition of power here. Because I was just kind of curious, like, what was meant to happen when Henry died? Was it this, or was there supposed to be something else, or maybe you don't know? I don't know.
It would have been their next heir, right? The next person in line, typically.
But it would have been the clergy facilitating it.
Of course, there was always this sort of, what do you want to call it, like a seesaw of power with the clergy and the rulers, right? So in this in this point in time, the clergy was a little. What was the heavier kid on the seesaw?
I see.
Okay. Eventually, once you reach to the point where Spain is the main power of the Holy Roman Empire and things of the sort, okay, the kings now have more power. The clergy is there, just there as show. But we're in a point in time where the clergy still, the holy in the Holy Roman Empire is still huge, right?
Capital H, Holy Roman Empire.
Capital H, holy. Now, here's the thing. They decide to elect a member of the House of Wealth in order to become the next Holy Roman Emperor. And the House of Wealth, of course, includes my sweet darling boy Otto.
Oh, yeah.
So
come on,
the
Otto.
clergy, the bishops who know of this man because he's just been hanging out with them for such a long time, they're like, okay, Otto is going to be our guy. Otto is going to be our Holy Roman Emperor. And he became Otto the Fourth. Now, interestingly, Kurt, at this point, the Holy Roman Empire holds not as much territory as it would, but it still holds a bunch of different places. Of course, Italy, of course, part of what is now Germany. But as soon as he became Holy Roman Emperor, he also became King of the Romans. He became the King of Italy, and he also became the King of Burgundy. Okay, so
wow.
he just immediately had all of these titles just by virtue of being the Holy Roman Emperor. And not only that, Kurt, he did this at 25 years old. So if you're feeling a little inadequate these days, just remember, you could be Holy Roman Emperor at 25.
Yeah, holy cow. He's married 3 times, relocates, and gets made emperor before he's 25. And we're here podcasting. Okay.
I would put it in the same level, Kurt. I mean, I don't know about you, but every single time I podcast with you, I feel like royalty.
That is so sweet, Luis. That's really nice. Frankly, over here, I'm just curious about whether I should have dedicated more time to working on farting or more time to becoming friends with bishops. But I know I should have done one of them, because my life definitely would be better off if I was super talented in one of those areas, according to these stories.
I am taking offense to this, Kurt, because I value you. I treasure this podcast as if it was the highest aristocratic merit, and nothing and no one can ever take that away from me.
If you really love me, Luis, jump, whistle, and fart right now. Case closed.
Oh, no.
You just missed your chances of being emperor, buddy.
I look like a fool, like a damn fool.
And not the right kind, yeah.
Not the right kind.
Not the cool kind of fool. Please continue.
Well, going back to our boy Otto the Fourth now. So because of this big coincidence that because he becomes Holy Roman Emperor, he becomes immediately the King of the Romans, the King of Italy, and the King of Burgundy, people are not happy, okay? Because
are they like, who is this guy?
They are like, who is this guy? Who just came here from England, right? And now is ruling over our entire country. I mean, listen, Kurt, even the people in England are feeling not great about this guy because all of a sudden he's now German, right? All of a sudden he now has German identity that comes with being the Holy Roman Emperor. One of the people that got really angry at him was the King of France, Philip II. Now, Philip II was really angry because, of course, Otto IV is now the King of Burgundy, which Burgundy is there. France.
Right. France. I only know this because of my research on the Viking boiling hot rod story, but there was the Kingdom of Franks, which then split up into 3 pieces, the middle piece being the Kingdom of Burgundy, and the west piece went on to become France. So, yeah, Philip is like, that was formerly mine, that this guy just strolled on down to Italy and got put in charge of. So yeah, I'd be a little annoyed too.
Exactly. And not just that, but we all know that the French and the British, or the French and the English, have had just the maddest beef for such a long time, right? So if you're the King of France and you realize that now your next door neighbor is English, you're not going to be very happy. And that's exactly what happens. Not only that, Philip II was a big fan of the Hohenstaufen dynasty. So seeing his friends deposed and seeing an English guy move in next door, of course he's going to try to do something about it. And that's what he does. He goes to war with the Holy Roman Empire, but more so, he goes to war with Otto IV. So
in Burgundy, or like in what format is this happening?
It's happening in Burgundy, but he's declared war on the Holy Roman Empire.
Right.
So he's declared war on Otto IV. Now, this is a big issue for Otto, right? Otto doesn't really know about politics. He knows how to schmooze people. He knows how to get in with people. He knows how to get in the hearts and minds of people.
And he knows a simple loophole to get out of a marriage.
Simple loophole that is never going to be used again in English.
Undiscovered flaw in the legal system to void your marriage.
This was the prior loophole before starting your own church was in vogue. But in any case, Otto is in a precarious situation. He is disliked by the French because of what we just mentioned with Philip. He's disliked by the Germans because he deposed a German family and is English. And his reign was on thin ice. People don't like this guy.
Yeah, not to mention in the background of all this, like you're talking about, the Holy Roman Empire seems like it's, a little bit held together with like Scotch tape right now. Like they've kind of 2 different power structures and it's got an identity crisis, and they're just like, throw out this dynasty, put this other guy who showed up in here.
That's
so
right.
He's already entering into a pretty volatile situation, and then it's like he's just surrounded by people who are mad at him.
And he's even in a more volatile, precarious situation, Kurt, when you take into account that due to having many wives across a lot of time that don't last you for a long time, there's a problem that comes with not having wives in this time, Kurt. And you want to take a guess what that is?
Well, I mean, okay, I feel like I've got 2 opposite things here. One is that like the church is going to be annoyed at him somehow, but I think the other one is maybe he's just going to be like philandering left and right.
Well, of course he was philandering, but because of that, Kurt, he has no heirs.
Oh, right.
He has no children.
Right, because he's 25, but that's only like 10 years from his expected death in this time period, so he's got to get on it.
That's right. He's got to get on with having a child, but all his wives have previously died or not, bored a son. So that's a big issue right now, especially if your kingdom is in an unsafe place.
Now, I've heard that's the woman's fault if she doesn't produce a male heir. Is that true, Luis?
Do you want to put that on the record, Kurt?
No, I'm just saying everything I've read historically says it's the wife's fault for not producing a male heir. So I just want to see, you're the expert on the Holy Roman Empire here, so you can feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, that's right.
But nonetheless, they're blaming him in this. Well, I guess he's got no woman in the picture to speak of, so it's like by default it's his fault.
Actually, at this point, he does have another woman in the picture. Her name is Maria of Brabant. Okay, so he is married. He is, like I told you, he's being consistently married strategically, and of course, it's not going to change once he's Holy Roman Empire. emperor because he needs to secure that dynasty. Right. He needs to secure the wealth dynasty that he's part of, but he's not getting any child. So at this point, that becomes his number one priority. Now, we do not know this. This is not in the historical record, but I would like to take a quick, educated guess as to what this man was doing at this time. He was panicking and really getting busy with his wife, trying to get a child. Okay. So no child, however, happened. Various theories arise from this. Maybe he was infertile, or maybe he was just going off to war with France like every 2 weeks. You know, I don't think like that's very conducive to having a child, personally. But that's just me. You know, who am I?
Right.
Now, finally, in 1213, the date 1213, he has a son that survives. Yay! He survives childbirth. Woo!
Woo!
Maria of Brabant also survives childbirth. So this is a big thing. We
were rooting for that too.
So Otto names his kid Henry, which, Kurt, I'm sorry, that's boring. Okay, you're in medieval England. Every second person's named Henry. Okay.
Also, the former guy was named Henry. Shouldn't he be trying to distance himself from that?
Yeah, but also his grandfather was named Henry. So again, everyone is named Henry in these days. So again, I have on my notes here, Kurt, Henry, open brackets, boring, because it is boring. It is boring. Now,
should have picked something cool like Roland the Fartist. That's just something that came up.
Just the thought, man. Just a thought. I actually, in my notes, in brackets, I have Roland the Farter, and it says exciting. So
big if true.
Big if true. Now, this child, Henry, is the only chance for the wealth dynasty to continue on, right? So they want to do all they can to keep him safe. And since the Holy Roman Empire is at war with France, they send him off to Bohemia, because Bohemia was a place that didn't have beef with Otto. Now, funny enough, a month later, this child is sent back. Bohemia did not want him. And there's a reason for it.
He's really following in his father's footsteps of being in the rich people foster care system.
Exactly. Now, they send this child back for a very specific reason. And this is very true. And don't laugh, it's no joke. They send him back because he was burping a lot. Okay.
Can he monetize it? Hang on. Court jester in his future? I don't know.
Who knows? But
can he hold a tune? Well, how's his pitch?
But if we actually can go back to the book Galenus Rex Annalus, which means the Galenian Annals of the Kings, which means essentially the doctor's journal, right?
Right.
So in that book for Otto's reign, there is an inscription, not an inscription. There is an item, right, that says, "The infant of 271 days holds incessant eruptions, a mouth agape at all hours in the day, reflects dis-ease in the bowels." Okay.
271 days? So we're talking about like a little baby here, like not even 1 year old?
Yes, this is a small child, Kurt, that was sent away to try to secure...
And the people were like, "Oh, he burps incessantly. We can't stand this baby."
Exactly. He was sent back from Bohemia, Kurt, all the way back to Burgundy, in this case, to, keep him safe. Now,
wow.
Not to make this already long story any longer, a burpy boy is a burpy boy. Henry, he's got them burps. He's got flatulence of the mouth, okay? Now, an even longer story shorter, 3 months after this child returns from Bohemia, he dies. So the one hope for the future of the Holy Roman Empire at the hands of the English dies with this burpy child.
Oh no. You don't know what you got till it's gone. They hated the burpy child. Now they realize it was the only hope for the empire.
Now this is curious because when burpy boy Henry died, Otto IV was imprisoned by the French. So he was not doing too well either during his campaign against the French.
Rough weekend for him.
That's right. So Philip's forces put him in a military prison, essentially. And weeks after this son dies, Otto also dies of apparent trauma, torture wounds, captured induced reasons is why he dies.
The usual business.
Happens. Now, because of this, because of the death of Otto and because of the death of his son Henry, Philip II was able to come out victorious. He ended up marrying Maria of Brabant, who was Otto's wife, and he secured a lineage to the Holy Roman Empire throne by having a child with Maria. And due to this, the Holy Roman Empire was French for around 160 years, all due to one single burpy boy.
To one boy who just burped a little too much.
Just
did they record what he died of?
I'm so glad you asked me this, Kurt, because historians are now arguing that this kid's ailment, right, this kid's dis-ease, as it was placed in the Rex Annus, it was a bowel imbalance, what some may call these days as gastritis, right?
Whoa.
And gastritis, you can treat gastritis with things like garlic or even fermented cabbage, which is something that was very much, present. At least cabbage was very much present in medieval England. So if they would found a way to ease this kid's gastritis, there's a possibility that the Holy Roman Empire could have been English for a long time and potentially changed the course of history.
I mean, I think it's just, it all goes back to the loss of tradition of the Fartists, Clearly something changed in these years, because if it had still been the same and they saw this kid, he's just erupting with violent bowel gases coming out of, both ends. Exactly. I mean, they would be like, this kid's going to be a star. He's Lisan al-Gaib. He's going to be the chosen one and fart us all to victory in the Crusades when we make an emperor. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the pieces were there, but unfortunately the funding had been pulled for Fart University, it seems, because, I don't know. I mean, it really, these two stories put together, it's interesting because in another context, you'd be like, man, this poor weirdo kid who was meant to be the heir and he just burped his way on out. Nobody wanted to babysit him. But you hear him back to back and you're like, oh, what we have lost as a society. We could have had the flatulent Holy Roman Empire. I mean, come on.
It's such a shame. Such a shame, isn't it?
That's how just yet another reason that we live in the darkest timeline, because somewhere out there in a perfect utopian society, they had this man, good old Burping Henry as the emperor.
Charlemagne was just looking from beyond the grave, just seeing a burpy boy and seeing how his whole empire, or that whole lineage, fell from just a little bit of tummy trouble. It makes you think. It really makes you think.
Man, and especially when we're talking about, this is the time where kings are right and left, like making everybody they can get to pay taxes, and that keeps backfiring. It's like, what this guy would have done instead of paying taxes? One jump, whistle, and a fart a year, okay? and that's not gonna collapse the empire. You're not gonna lose millions of whatever currency on a crusade. All right, just put him in charge. I don't know. They fumbled it, Luis. What can I say? They fumbled it. He didn't even have hemophilia. The kid was fine.
We could have paid for the entire Crusades with just a bunch of jumps, whistles, and farts.
We had it all in the palm of our hand, and we squandered it, frankly. I mean, that's just so disappointing.
Makes you think.
Well, Luis, I've got a lot on my mind here, and I don't know if I'm happy or upset about the fact that so much of it is related to farts, but either way, I've just got many pieces of information you've told me in my brain, and I think that I'm running out of the strength to hold them, so maybe we got to move on to some separating out truth and lies here.
That's true, Kurt. Well, you know what? I think it's time to move on to our least favorite part of this podcast, which of course is
deliberation.
Now, Curtis, let me remind you of the two stories that I told you today. The first one, the second one, which you have just heard, was, of course, about Otto IV trying his best to secure a dynasty, all to be brought down by one burping baby It's like the atom bomb versus one coughing baby. This was one English Holy Roman Empire versus burping child. And it was all brought down by a little bit of gastritis. And in a similar vein, our very first story, also talking about bodily functions and bodily excretions in a way, was of course of Roland the Farter, who was a court jester for Henry II in medieval England, who was granted a manor and an estate of around 100 acres for being able to jump, whistle, and fart at the very same time. Kurt, what do you think?
All right. Well, I think, normally I would kind of go through the stories one by one, but I think I actually want to talk about them both at the same time this time.
Okay.
And I'll say, out of interest, right now in this moment, I have no idea which one I'm going to go with. I'm like super duper lost.
Okay.
So one thing about both these stories, obviously they both have a lot of wild oddities in here. They're both kind of in the same time period, and it's this time period where it's like, I would believe almost anything you told me about their society. Like the bar for what is too weird for them to have done is unfathomably high. So,
yeah.
I've been trying to weigh like farting court jester versus burping heir, and it seems plausible either way.
Aren't we all?
Then the second piece of these stories that I think is, in the true one really true and in the made up one really masterfully crafted, is that it has exactly, it seems, the right amount of information and from exactly the right sources. I'll say after you were telling me about how a lot of the things we know about Roland are from the tax records, I was feeling very good about that because I thought that's really believable that like the few information we have would be from the taxes. Then we go over to this other stuff, and it's also all things that would be recorded, like this guy's weird, kind of half in, half out nobility shenanigans up till the point he ends up in Italy. And then as the emperor, of course, we're going to be concerned with what's going on with the heir. So, just on both ways, I'll say no matter which one the true story is and which one the false one is, you did a really great job because I could, you tell me either one of those stories in a vacuum and I would easily believe it. So here I am, of course, as everyone predicted, eating my words about your poor fiction writing abilities.
I see, Kurt. Interesting. How curious.
Right. Now, that being said, I think what it comes down to for me, because obviously there's big differences between the stories, but just kind of on the merits of me judging true or false, they have a lot of similarities. It's really down to just the length, because the first story was a little shorter. And, I guess I'm really trying to think of, is it more likely that you found these tidbits and then filled time? Or is it more likely that you had this kind of funny little idea of the farting fool, which could easily have come to your brain, and then also knew all this information about the Holy Roman Empire, as you are likely to know. So, man, I'm just really in a quagmire. Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna go with my gut here. I'm feeling Roland the Fartist. Man, oh man, if this is not true, I'm gonna have to erase so much stuff from my brain. I think Roland was a real guy. I'm all in on this jump whistle fart thing. Okay, so be it.
Yeah.
Send it. I'm believing in Roland. And you know what? If that turns out to be false, I'm gonna feel like a real idiot because the other one was longer. So like probably just hedging my bets, I should have picked the longer one. But I'm sending it. I'm all in on Roland. Please tell me what's going on here.
I think this is one of the quickest deliberations we've had in a while, Kurt. Frankly, I think your mind is nice and made up. I appreciate that a lot.
It's not that it's made up. I'm just equally confused and unmade up about both of them. So I may as well just pick one and get it over with.
Are we going back to our season 1 mentality? If we just want the story to be real. We're choosing the story
that's where I'm at this point. I'm just wish casting. I just really hope that one's true.
Well, Kurt, I am going to tell you that story of Roland the Farter is indeed the true story.
Oh yes! Oh my gosh, that you don't know how good that feels to get, Louis. Because as everybody, our longtime listeners know, I really needed that point, but also. Man, I actually was like gonna have to like meditate for a long time to work all that fart knowledge out of my brain that stuff didn't happen, because that's just too good. So that's really nice to hear. Let's just all of us enjoy for a moment that this is really something that we as a species did not even that long ago, frankly, in the grand scheme of human history. It was like like 5 minutes ago in the terms of human history that we were
That's
like
right.
granting estates and money and ridiculous riches for people who could whistle and fart simultaneously once a year.
And I love that. I really do believe that humans are the best species on Earth. Not for our use of resources, not for our technological advancements, not for anything else except for the fact that we say farts are just funny, right? And I just think that's lovely.
Yeah. And, I'm really interested to know what the true parts, if any, of the other story were. But first, I want to say that you did a really great job with that because aside from, just like I was saying about all the information seeming exactly like it's the right information and from the right source, I think you also played a pretty dangerous game with talking about the Holy Roman Empire, and especially with what was this, the nephew of Richard the Lionheart, who we've talked about on this podcast before. So, not only are we kind of like bumping into history that you have told me, but also there was a big risk that I could have known just exactly the right piece of information to know that this wasn't the right person at the right time, or this wasn't what was going on. But even with all that, between the wives dying under mysterious circumstances and the struggles of power, and we have so many different names of countries and moving pieces in here. That was I think probably one of the realest feeling made up stories you've ever told me. Like I said, if you told me that in a vacuum, I would have no reason to question it.
Well, Kurt, it's interesting. I'm glad you asked this because Otto the Fourth was indeed a real person, and Otto the Fourth was indeed the grandson of Henry II. So this is a person in history that was close enough to our first story, but just far enough to not really be important to the historical record, even though he really was a Holy Roman Emperor, Kurt.
Oh, and how did that happen?
That literally happened because the clergy didn't want the Hohenstaufen family dynasty to come in. And they just said, "Oh, I guess we're gonna choose some dude." They actually wanted to choose. They wanted to choose Otto's older brother. Funny enough, also named Henry, and they wanted to choose him. However, he was off in a crusade, so they ended up choosing Otto. So it was just even more mediocre. It was even more default. Conformist. That's right. Yeah, no one really liked Otto.
Wow. That's amazing that he was even more arbitrarily chosen than what you had in the story. Because truthfully, that was the only part that I thought seemed like a little bit of a sketchy detail. That it's a big deal to do the transition of power, and especially if you're going from one dynasty to a totally separate ruler. So I was just thinking like, it's not that couldn't happen, but it couldn't happen every time. That's for sure. I mean, that has to be like a very once in a while deal, and also because when you do something like that, where you say like, we're just going to kind of arbitrarily pick another rich person we like to be in charge, that does draw attention to the fact that there's no real qualifications for the person who is the emperor except for being like mostly in the right place at the right time. So you really, again, don't want to keep doing that because at a certain point, people are going to be like, why are we letting them pick? Let's just rise up and pick ourselves. So I will say I was thinking about that detail and I was like, that just seems too easy. I feel like in real life, it would be much more complicated, at least. There are many more moving parts and like this long process to try and ensure it holds together. But wow, what a wild detail to find out that not only is that basically what happened, but it's even flimsier than that. That we're like, we wish we could throw the dynasty out and put this guy on the throne, but he's not here. So instead, we'll just put his brother there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the first cases where I have to omit a detail from a real story to make it fake. Because it would have sounded too fake otherwise. However, that really is the only basis of this story, right? The real history of this story. This guy did have multiple wives, but it's just because one of them died. It didn't really happen, but one of them died, and the second
Unmysterious circumstances.
Mysterious circumstances. I mean, who knows?
Oh, still mysterious. Okay, all right. Well,
we actually have no idea. But he had a second wife, but none of those marriages bore any children at all. There was no child that was born and died because of burp. I mean, I made up most of the details, right? So I made up the details of the burping child, the details of the Galenus Rex Annalus, or whatever. I was really feeling the fact that I quoted a Latin book in the previous story. I wanted to quote another Latin book in this story too. So
Yeah, that was really dirty that you translated Latin in both stories. Because when you did the first one, I was like, that's got to be the real one. Because I don't know, that would just be like a lot of work for Luis to put in. And then you did the second one, and I was like, you prick, you're enjoying this.
And interestingly enough, Otto ended up dying because he pissed off the Pope, and he pissed
That'll
off the
do it.
clergy. There's a story that says that he died because he was beaten up to death by clergymen with canes. So,
Oh wow, the grandpa beat down. Look out, dude.
that's right. So I mean, who knows? Yeah, we really don't have any. It's one of these figures in history who probably thought they were going to be more important to world history than they actually were. But who the hell remembers Otto the Fourth? Absolutely not me. You know,
Man, he got done in by the geriatric Ides of March. That's rough.
that's true.
I am curious to ask, was there any inspiration, or what was your thought process behind the baby's burping too much idea? Because, I think had it been me, I would have been really tempted to go with hemophilia, because it's like right there for the taking, but it's almost too obvious. So I can, I get picking something else, but was there any reason behind the burping, or that was just what you came up with?
Kurt, I will say before I wrote this story, I found the story of Roland the Farter, so I had farts in my mind. And I thought it'd be really funny to combine it with another bodily function. See, Kurt, regardless of how much research I put on or how much effort I put into these stories, I am just a simple guy with a simple brain that just wants to talk about burps and farts. And that's what I'm doing.
a simple man. I see a concept like fartist, and that's what I think about it.
Exactly. I'm using my platforms to further my ideology, and that is farts and burps for everyone.
A fartist in every home.
A fartist in every home. Now, speaking of fartists, I just want to tell you this before we head out, Kurt. Did you know that flatulists are still around?
No.
Flatulists are still part of the culture. Of course, they're not, as big as they once used to be. The last big famous flatulist had a stage name named Le Pétoman, which literally means the... it's a portmanteau of péter, which means to fart, and man, which is maniac. So it's the fart maniac. And he was a French guy from the turn of the century, so 1900s, who was so good at farting. He used to be able. What he used to do, he would suck in water into his anus and then fart it out. Right. And he became so big, his act became so well known that he moved to Paris, where he appeared at the Moulin Rouge. And according to data from the time and journalists from the time, some of the highlights of this Moulin Rouge stage act involved sound effects of cannon fire and thunderstorms, as well as playing O Sole Mio and La Marseillaise on an ocarina through a rubber tube in his anus.
What?
He could also allegedly blow out a candle from several yards away. And some of the noted audience members that went to see Le Pétoman was Edward, Prince of Wales, King Leopold II of the Belgians, and also Sigmund Freud. So give it up for Le Pétoman.
Oh, man.
And, there are actually pictures and videos, recordings of this man, and we will share these around with you. And finally,
that's amazing.
And yeah, it's lovely. It's very lovely to know that the world has not lost fartists, and I think we all live better lives for it.
Truly. Don't next time you guys are out there watching The Great Gatsby, don't forget that somewhere in that world out there's a man farting into an ocarina. And people paying good money to see it.
Exactly.
Man, it goes back to look at what we've lost, Luis. Look at what we've lost. Mm-hmm. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. No Super Bowl halftime show will possibly match the enjoyment I could get from seeing a man play the Marseillaise with his butt in an ocarina. And judge me as you will for that, but they would get my money for price of admission. I'm just going to let you folks know now.
Well, Kurt, with that, what does that bring our score up to as of today?
It's 4 for you and 2 for me, so I slowly claw my way back. I want to put it out here right now, just an interesting little kind of insider look at this, that, let's see, it was the first season, you got a really big lead, and then the second season, I got a really big lead, and now you're threatening to come back and get a really big lead again. So I don't know if we've got like some kind of ebb and flow thing, but I'll say I'm trying with every fiber of my being to break that cycle because, as we all know, third time's the charm. So this one's really for the bragging rights. So I'm very glad to see me closing the gap as opposed to you widening it, but still a long way to go.
Well, speaking of closing the gap as well as farting, please let me know.
Opening
let us
the gap.
know. Oh, come on, Kurt. Don't get vulgar on us. But please let us know if you've guessed this episode correctly. You can find us on social media. We are on Instagram at UnbelievablePod. You can find us on Twitter at UnbelievablePC. We'll be sharing a couple of photos. Maybe we'll share a photo of Peto Man, the fartiste of the turn of the century. That's just a little fun things we do over on our social media. So please go check us out.
Just the kind of cool guys we are.
That's right. Please, if you see us on any of the platforms you listen to us to, give us a quick rating. I would appreciate that personally. And if you don't, I will take that personally. So that's up to you if you want to see me cry. If it was Kurt, he wouldn't leave a review. He only wants to see me cry. But so
that's
be
true. It's incentive.
it. With that, thank you very much. This is Unbelievable. I'm Luis with Kurt. And we'll be talking to you next time, fartists.
And remember, if you're good at something, especially farting, never do it for free. Could get a manner out of the deal. Bye, y'all.
Huh. See ya.